Alright, so it took us about 6 years to get here, but we have finally gotten to Game 1 of the NBA Finals, which is, at this point, might as well just be called Game 1 of the Battle of the Switches, especially if Dallas intends to keep doing this as the series goes on. The Celtics win Game 1 pretty convincingly, and it was mainly due to what I just said. Dallas just constantly switching. Now, I'm not sure what exactly I said in the last video talking about the series and basically just the preview of the series in general, but every time that someone has asked me over the last week or so who I think would win the series or what my predictions would be for this matchup, I would always just tell them the same thing. I don't really know what is about to happen, but I do know that the play of Kristaps Porzingis is probably going to be one of the biggest factors coming into the series. Given just that he's been out for so long, you don't really know how he's going to look, even though you kind of assumed that he was already healthy, probably in the middle of the Pacers series. They just didn't want to bring him back in a low leverage situation. And so I said that that would probably be one of the biggest factors. And Game 1, it was on full display. This dude was an absolute menace on both ends of the floor, especially in the first half. They did make the decision to bring him off the bench for Game 1 specifically. I'm not sure if that's going to change Game 2 or, maybe Game 3, but it did seem to pay off. He was, in the first half specifically, he was 7 for 9 from the field. A lot of those shots coming off of switches, which I have just explained and we'll go into more detail in a second. 2 for 3 from 3, both of them being 30-footers, and 2 blocks, which was pretty fundamental in them building the huge lead that they did in the first half and that huge run that they went on towards the end of the first quarter and into the second quarter. It was really interesting to see what Dallas was actually doing with him, because they weren't really, they were pretty content to just give up the switch almost every single time, even when it was a guard or someone that was half a foot shorter than him. It was so bizarre to me. Now, I understand the thought process behind switching against the Celtics. You don't want to be giving up 3-pointers, especially from the pick and roll ball handler, which a lot of times was Derek White or Jason Tatum, Drew Holiday. And so I can understand not wanting to give up threes like that the whole game. But even then, this is the problem with switching when you don't really have the types of defenders that the Celtics have. Kristaps Porzingis is just a matchup nightmare, especially when you do switch. He is one of the best players in the entire NBA at punishing you for switching. And he was just shooting over the top of everybody on the roster for the entire first half. There were plays where he literally didn't even need to move or didn't even need to create a shot. He would just shoot over the top and it was an open shot every time because they just simply couldn't get to the ball. Once again, I predicted that he would be a huge factor coming into the series, and it's very apparent that him just being on the floor changes this entire team. The Celtics are still very good, even without him, especially with Al Horford being the center to take his place in his absence. But with him there, it just completely adds another dimension. There were a couple plays where the Dallas bigs, specifically Daniel Gafford, were just completely caught off guard by the spacing that was on the floor. Coming out of a series playing against Rudy Gobert, who is not leaving the paint, and then going into a series where you're guarding Kristaps Porzingis in transition. This play in particular just sums up everything. Daniel Gafford is running back on defense. He's about to go to the paint, and then at the last second he realizes, oh my god, I am guarding Kristaps, but it's already too late. Kristaps already has a good look from 3, even from all the way out here. Both of his threes in the first half were from 30 feet away. It's just a completely different team. So much so that you have nights like this where Jason Tatum, although he is gonna get slandered for not being able to hit a shot consistently, he was doing a lot of the collapsing the defense, driving kicks, finding open shooters, things like that. He was a great rebounder in this game. He had 11 rebounds and he was playing some pretty good defense pretty much the entire game. His only issues were his scoring and his turnovers. He had 6 turnovers, which I expect both of those to kind of be cleaned up as the series goes on, maybe as soon as Game 2. But even with him not really being a scoring factor in this game, the Celtics still win by almost 20 points because Jaylen Brown maybe had his best playoff game of the entire postseason, if not definitely one of the best. Even though it doesn't really look like it on paper, 22 points, 6 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 steals, and 3 blocks. Those 3 steals and 3 blocks were absolutely crucial in this game. There were a couple plays where Dallas Mavericks were just meeting Jaylen Brown at the rim and getting denied. There was one on Kyrie Irving Irving late in the third quarter, I believe, and then there was one crazy block against Derrick Jones Jr. It's just things like that that really just set the tone for the entire game. He had a couple nice steals. There was one specifically on Luka Doncic where he was just dribbling the ball up the court. There was a play similar to this where Luka was dribbling up the court and he did a behind the back to his left side to kind of get around Jaylen Brown to get into the front court. And so a little bit later in the game, he sees that he is kind of setting up for that same behind the back again, and he just anticipates it this time perfectly. It's an easy steal and a wide open dunk. Celtics leading scorer with only 22 points, and that's really just because everybody on the Celtics was just cooking except for Peyton Pritchard. The Celtics in this game actually became the first finals team in NBA history to have 7 or more players hit multiple threes in the same game. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Al Horford, Derek White, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Sam Hauser. Some of them were just typical Celtics tough shot making. I'm thinking specifically of this one, Jason Tatum just shooting right over the top of Daniel Gafford in the first quarter. I mean, there's not really much else that Daniel Gafford can really do here, but a lot of them were just the driving kick plays that we've seen so often from the Celtics team throughout the entire season, and Dallas really couldn't stop it. And I feel like that's when we kind of shift our attention to the other side of the court, because the Dallas Mavericks played, I wouldn't say a terrible game, I would say they played an interesting game. Like I said before, they were pretty content to just switch a lot of these actions, which that's something that you really don't want to do, especially with guys like Kristaps Porzingis on the floor. Obviously, I said the possible reason for why they maybe wanted to be switching earlier in the video, but obviously that's just the consequence of that game plan, is that you're going to be giving up a lot of mismatches to a team that their whole offense, or a big part of their offense, is hunting for mismatches. Another factor about the Dallas Mavericks, that more specifically Kyrie Irving, that I noticed in this game, they seemed very hesitant, or at least like very indecisive at times, especially on offense. Kyrie Irving, he's had his underwhelming games so far this playoffs, but this was different, because not only was he just missing open shots, there were times where he would get favorable switches onto him. Like he would get guys like Sam Hauser switched onto him and he just wouldn't really do anything with that. And so I feel like the aggression level from Kyrie is something that is going to be interesting to see as the series goes on. I believe that he is going to be more aggressive, especially on those mismatches in game 2. We will see, because as of right now, really the only player that actually hooped in this game for Dallas was Luka Doncic. 30 points, 10 assists, 12 for 26 from the field, 4 for 12 from 3. One assist for Luka Doncic. The Dallas Mavericks had 9 assists as a team. In a whole game, they had 9 assists as a team, which is absolutely unfathomable, especially in today's NBA where there's just so much going on offense. I was a little bit worried coming into the series about how Al Horford would look, especially on the switches with guys like Kyrie Irving. In the switch against Luka Doncic, he definitely looked very solid, especially earlier on in the game. And so there really wasn't that many favorable matchups that they could go at the entire game, which is basically the entire idea of this entire Celtics team. Although I did think that Luka kind of started to find something, especially at the start of the third quarter when they were going on their run. Specifically these 2 back-to-back plays. They're obviously going to be switching with Al Horford a lot. He's probably going to be Luka's best defender in this series, as weird as that might sound. This Al Horford switch specifically, Luka tries to get to a step back 3, which he does. Al Horford actually does a really great job of recovering here, and he actually gets the block. Counter to that, about a minute and a half later, Luka is basically doing the same thing, this time pick and roll with Derek Lively instead of Daniel Gafford. Same things, Al Horford switches, and it looks like he's trying to get to that step back again, so Al Horford plays up a little bit higher on him this time, and Luka is just able to get him on his hip, which basically means that you are done. The possession is ending here. Easy layup. Well, not easy, but you know what I mean. A little bit later, Al Horford is now out of the game at this point. They're running screen and roll again with Derek Lively. Porzingis is actually telling Derek White to go pick up Luka on the switch, because if not, Porzingis is going to be switched out onto Luka, which means that he is not going to be down protecting the rim when Derek Lively starts rolling to the basket. Even though Jason Tatum is going to have this matchup, that's not really favorable, or at least not as favorable as having Kristaps Porzingis in the paint paint. And so KP is telling Derek White to pick up on the screen, which he does, but Luka is just Luka. And so there are definitely things that Dallas can take away from this, especially with how they could use Boston's switching strategy against them. Because the reason that this happened was because it led to a lot of mismatches similar to what Dallas was giving up in the first half with Kristaps Porzingis. There were a lot of times when Derek White would be in the paint, even though he is a better rim protector than he has any business being as a guard. You still would rather have Kristaps Porzingis and Al Horford down here than Derek White. But overall, I'm not really going too crazy over this game. Boston did exactly what you would expect them to do, even though Jason Tatum didn't really get off scoring wise. Neither did Kyrie Irving. He didn't hit a single three, 0 for 5 from 3, 6 for 19 from the field overall. PJ Washington had a pretty subpar game, didn't hit a single 3. In fact, the only players that actually hit a 3 before garbage time were Derek Jones Jr. and Luka Doncic. And so that's going to be something to keep an eye on as the series goes on as well, because a lot of the threes that they did miss were good looks that they've been getting throughout the entire playoffs. And so a lot more of those are probably going to be going in, especially the ones by Kyrie Irving, because he was missing some crazy open shots, like shots that you actually can't believe that he missed. Overall, I think this is going to be a very good series. Like, even though Boston looked pretty dominant throughout most of the game, that one big third quarter run where they cut the 29-point lead to 8 was pretty telling about Dallas's actual ability to be able to compete with this team. The problem was that they gave up a huge run themselves in the first quarter, which created a hole that they just had to climb out of the entire game after that, and just couldn't do it. But I feel like in a back and forth game, it's gonna be much more indicative of who Dallas actually is as a team. But of course, the Boston Celtics are pretty freaking good, so we'll have to wait and see. That's about it from me. I'm gonna be releasing some videos throughout the finals just on other teams and, you know, what their off seasons could be looking like, so you can look forward to those. But with all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you're new, hit the bell to be notified when I upload, comment down below what you want to see next, and as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.